It's right here where one of the most tragic events at the Berlin Wall took place in its entire 28-year history. This is where the 21-year-old Peter Göring was shot and killed. But this is going to take something of an explanation. Let's just do a brief overview of how and why the Berlin Wall went up. So Germany is occupied by 4 of the victorious World War II powers in 1945. Through various disagreements, they eventually end up separating Germany into 2 countries, the capitalist West and the communist East. And the capitalist West is a lot wealthier. It's backed by a lot of American money. It's tempting for a lot of people to go over there from East Germany, especially because the Soviet-occupied part of Germany used to be a lot bigger, or could have been a lot bigger, but the new state of Poland was formed, or the new borders, I should say, of Poland were formed. And as a result, millions of Germans were turfed out of their homes, sent westward. The first place where they arrived was what would become East Germany. And so those people aren't from there. They've lost everything. They certainly have a reason to leave, or a lack of connection of where they now live. The other reason why people would have left is simply they weren't very excited about communism. In fact, they feared it. The communists were once the 3rd largest party in Germany, right up before the Nazis were elected. And one reason that many people did turn to the Nazis was that they were tough on communism, that they said that they were going to put an end to the Communist Party. And then, of course, you've got years and years of propaganda about how the communists are so evil. These are the people that we're fighting over in the East. Certainly people would have internalized that. And then you have collectivized farms leading to crops that aren't so good. So do you know what? There's more money and there's more food over there. And when I say over there, I mean here. That was East Berlin. This is West Berlin, right? And so what you find after the 2 Germanys are founded is that eventually millions of East Germans will actually leave the country, and a lot of them will be very young. The lowest estimates I see are about 2.6 million, ranging up to about 3 million people that left, with about half of those being under 25. And of course, young people cost money. They cost money for the state. Their education costs money. East Germany did a wonderful job of really finding people's talents and educating them and letting them go on to higher forms of education than would have been possible under the old system, or were possible in the West. But if those people take that great education and then leave, then it has basically no value for East Germany. And so 2 things happen that stop people leaving the country. The onset of the Iron Curtain, as it was dubbed by Winston Churchill in 1952. A hard border right through the center of Europe, separating the communist East from the capitalist West. The other thing is, of course, the Berlin Wall. But that's not for another 9 years later. And so in that time, the way that people escape from East Germany is through West Berlin. It's, almost a case of just walking over to the other side, knocking on the door of the authorities and saying hello. If you showed up with, all of your belongings and your grandmother, you might get stopped. Where were we? Not getting shot, meaning we're leading up to getting shot. So East Germany decides to take drastic action on the 13th of August, 1961, by sealing the border around West Berlin. West Berlin is entirely inside of East Germany, and so the perimeter belongs to them. And so 13th of August, 1961, at 3 a.m., 38,000 or so soldiers, police, volunteers, they roll barbed wire right the way around West Berlin. People will often ask me on my tours if this was the Soviets or the Russians who did this, and no. It's debatable as to whether or not they knew this was going to happen, but certainly it wasn't their idea, and it wasn't something that they asked for or that they cared about. This was an East German-led decision going right to the top, going up to Walter Ulbricht, who famously said, "Oh, nobody's talking about building a wall." Well, that very first wall that was built, this is often a little bit misleading because they say it goes up overnight, but yeah, it was just barbed wire, it was armed guards, it was also a lot of tension. Yeah, this city is all of a sudden divided. Imagine waking up to that. That's happened overnight. Well, a lot of people saw this as their last warning and decided to jump over. Many of them, the very border guards that were supposed to make sure that people stayed in the East. It wasn't until good few days after the wall had gone up, until the 24th of August, 61, that the first person was shot. His name was Gunther Litvin, and he was actually killed trying to swim through this canal, very near to where I'm standing as well. He was shot in the back by traffic police. The event that I want to talk about, though, happened less than a year after this, on the 23rd of May, 1962, when a young man named Wilfried Thews decided to also swim through the border right here. When I say young man, he was only 14. Now, on the other side of the water here, you have have to imagine a fairly slapdash wall has gone up by that point, a brick wall. There are very cheap and quickly made guard towers, and one of the guards inside of there was Peter Göring. Now, Peter Göring had had not the most typical life, let's say. His dad had been killed in World War II, so he'd grown up in a children's home without a father. He had volunteered to join the East German armed forces, right? You can imagine that he wanted a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, and also a position in society that was deemed to be honorable somewhat, defending your country. If he'd have swallowed the pill of the East German propagandists, of course, the wall was the anti-fascist protection barrier. The Nazis, you know, they survived in the West, and that's in some cases true, that Nazis were more likely to get back into government or into positions of power in West Germany than they were into the East. And so this is the lie, the propaganda that the East German state told their people about the wall. It didn't go up to stop you leaving, it went up to protect you from them, the bad guys. So, of course, you can imagine anyone who wants to join the armed forces and is very happy to work on the Berlin Wall, yeah, it's fair enough to say that they would believe this. And when you look into internal government documents, when you look into the secret police, the Stasi, their own archives, you can see that they consistently use this language, right? They don't talk about it in plain terms behind closed doors. They are always using the language of the dictatorship to reinforce that constantly, every moment, at least that they're at work, if not in their free time as well. And so, Peter Göring then, he sees somebody escaping, and it's his job, although the order to shoot was only ever given verbally, there's no evidence of it, no hard evidence of it, but it was his job, as he saw, to open fire. And so he did. In fact, according to one report that I read, he opened fire more than 40 times. Of all the border guards who together shot 120 rounds, he supposedly shot 1/3 of them just by himself. Now, border guards were ordered to not open fire on children. And even then, Göring had been ordered, because the West Berlin police were returning fire as they pulled Wilfried Tschüss out of the water. He'd been ordered not to leave his post, but he did. He left his post to get a better shot at that 14-year-old, and he hit him. One source says he was hit 7 times, another source says 8 times. Either way, both of them say that he was left permanently disabled as a result. So yeah, Peter Göring disobeyed orders to get a better shot at that 14-year-old. And yeah, he was killed in return. The bullet that killed him was actually a ricochet, but that information wouldn't come out for years and years and years until the Berlin Wall had come down, because of course, the East German state as a dictatorship, it was fragile. They couldn't stand up there and say, well, he was a wrong 'un and he got what he deserved. No, the East German press had to say that he was a young man, communist, loved his country, cut down in his prime, protecting East Germany from the fascists. This is what the Stasi report says, that this was yet another in a series of attacks on the anti-fascist protection barrier, a series of shots and explosions. And that actually, as a result of this event, the border guards themselves have to become more tough, more resilient. So this information then comes out in the 1990s of what a wrong-un this guy was, and people have to then reckon with it, because of course people grow up in East Germany. Just if you knew his name, you knew he was a hero. There's a unit in the military named after him. In the town of Strausberg, just next to Berlin, you can get there on the S-Bahn, there's a street named after him still to this day, and there was a school named after him as well, but that was renamed in the early 2000s. And of course, you have this interesting problem of sorts in this country, in this reunified Germany of the 1990s in particular, where, yeah, you've got to get rid of some of the East German stuff. Obviously the physical stuff in terms of the wall, the border guards and all of this, but also certain elements of East German life and culture have to disappear. It's quite easy, and I think pertinent, to argue that perhaps too many of them did, or that those things were taken away very quickly, and that people were made to feel like their entire lives were somehow inferior. This is, I would say, still a big problem in the country today. But to convince people that they've been lied to, that Peter Göring is a bad guy, a guy who doesn't deserve to have a street named after him, that should be easy, but it also felt, I think, to a lot of people like some kind of victor's justice from the West. I find it mad that there's still a street named after him. My opinion is probably quite clear from this video. I think, you know, it's an important story to learn from. It's important to learn how a dictatorship gets into somebody's head and how it makes them act in a certain way. But I think anyone saying that this guy is a hero for shooting at a 14-year-old needs looking at. And yeah, I decided to go look for Peter Göring up at the Berlin Wall Memorial. There's this window wall there where you've got, so they say, all of the victims of the Berlin Wall, all the people that were killed at the wall. Now, there's a couple of problems with that in that, firstly, the wall's just a bit old. You know, the window wall there was opened up, I want to say 2008, maybe 2009. And it has 136 faces on it, where they've got photographs of people, and it's just incomplete as a result of the fact that this history is so recent and therefore changing. A few more deaths have been confirmed since that was built. Peter Göring's not on there. That decision was already made 15 or so years ago. The window goes in chronological order, and where we should have May 23rd, there is no Peter Göring. So that's the story, essentially, and a bit of ramble, a bit of thoughts about it. I hope that you found that interesting. Of course, there's quite a lot of opinion in there, which is not typical for me, I think. So I'm interested to know what your thoughts and opinions are, whether or not you've heard this story before, thought about this story before. Yeah, let me know below. And what I would just request is that you keep chat, insightful, polite, even if it's opinionated, because YouTube comments have, I think, always been a terrible place. If you're the kind of person listening to me say that, then you're going to write a nice comment anyway, I know. Anyways, quick reminder, I am the only sponsor of these videos. If you like what you see, make sure that you hit like. If you really like what you see, hit subscribe. And if you really, really, really like it, then why not tell someone about it? All right, goodbye from me.